Hello again. I know, 2 uploads in one day? Like, what happened to moderation, Alicia? Come on now. Moderation. You gotta do it. I was gonna read for a little bit, but I'm gonna title this as a brain video. Brain. And so today I watched the documentary, or maybe not documentary, I'm not sure, on Netflix about psychedelics. It's a pretty cool watch. Lots of hot names. Pretty cool watch. And then my neighbors downstairs are blazing it right now. And it's just making me think about altered states of consciousness, which is kind of what we're talking about with the brain. So I'm going to read just a little bit. Chapter 1, ground rules. There's a little part up at the top that I'm going to skip so that if you end up reading this book, you can fully experience the richness of the content. There's an extra little pizzazz for you if you read it. That way I'm not doing the author as a disservice by discussing her content on the interwebs. This light right now, is it blinding? I'm so sorry. Sun! Anyway, nature of explanation in science. Let's do it. In science, the nature of explanation is most often that some empirical phenomenon is considered explained if it can be related to previously established fundamental principles. For example, the motion of the baseball is explained at the beginning of the 21st century in terms of force imparted by the pitcher's arm, the resistance of the atmosphere, the air turbulence caused by the spin of the ball, and most of all in terms of force of gravity. But what about the situation in 1620 with regard to the explanation of the motion of planets? It is technically true to say that Newton explained planetary motion in terms of fundamental principles of gravitational attraction, but explained has a subtly different sense here. The principles of gravitation, or at least its universality, was actually being established by Newton's explanation of the motion of planets. So in this case, Newton was not relating a single empirical phenomenon to previously established fundamental principles. He was relating several otherwise independent phenomena, Kepler's 3 laws of planetary motion, to a common underlying principle, which thereby became established. In other words, when there are already established fundamental principles in an area, an empirical phenomena is considered to be explained if it can be related to these fundamental principles. If there are no fundamental principles already established, such principles first come to be established. The way this generally happens is that the fundamental principles are first proposed and then shown to be valid by showing that they explain many otherwise unrelated observations. In essence, what this book is doing is proposing a basic fundamental scientific principle regarding consciousness and then seeking to establish the principles by showing that it explains many observations. I just need to point out that is a very pleasant sentence to say. In essence, what this book is doing is proposing a basic fundamental scientific principle regarding consciousness. That's gotta be like Pirates of Penzance. I'm not gonna sing. The basic fundamental principle being proposed here is that consciousness is identical with certain spatiotemporal patterns in the electromagnetic field. Ooh. At this stage, we can say nothing about the shape of these spatiotemporal electromagnetic patterns or the nature of the rules that connect such patterns with subjective experience. Those details will come later. What we need to first do is trying to establish the truth of the basic fundamental principle that certain spatiotemporal electromagnetic patterns are identical with conscious experiences. The analysis above about how fundamental principles are generally established in science would suggest that all we need to do is come up with some measured electromagnetic field patterns that always vary with conscious experience. If we do this, we should have established our fundamental principle by showing that it does tie together all the observations that so far have been made. And there is reasonable hope that it will tie together observations yet to be made about conscious experience. As an optimist, or indeed a historian of science, might well accept this proposal. So I'm just going to stop here and do a little tangent. So I work in a manual labor job. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and lately I've been listening to Sam Harris's podcast, skipping through vast swaths and skipping episodes until he has something in his field that he can say. And there was one, I will go and try to find who it was with, because it's been a couple of weeks now since I listened to that podcast. But he spoke with someone regarding AI, and then he also spoke with someone regarding consciousness, and that there's an easy problem and a hard problem, and like how we define consciousness, and what. So there dismount. Sorry. There's a question of what separates like humanity from other like animals or whatever, and using the psychedelic documentary from today, one of the videos that they showed as source from, I think, the 60s, from an U.S. Army research, where the person presenting was saying that they had given LSD to all of these different animals, and any living creature that they had given it to reacted. So the altered states of consciousness are not a purely human thing, which also implies that consciousness is not just a human thing. Then if we also, the example in the Sam Harris podcast was a bat. So if you look at a bat, the bat it feels like something to be the bat. And so we could theoretically switch with the bat and have some sort of experience. And they were using that as a sort of proof of that other living beings have consciousness besides just human beings, which is kind of an attractive, but also it's an attractive viewpoint. It's also an existentially challenged one, because if humanity over the past millennia has been built on like religion, which has man as this very special creation, set aside, set higher than, like, God spoke to humans as opposed to piggies or spiders or ducks, whatever. And that's good to, that feels good. It feels good to feel better than, feel different, feel like some sort of supreme functionality of consciousness. And I'm excited to continue this book because it kind of is alluding to a physical phenomena that would explain the experience of consciousness as a human. The book which led me to this woman, Susan Pocket, and her work was a trilogy of books called Hominids, Humans, and I can't remember the third one, by Robert J. Sawyer, who's an anthropologist. He did a lot of research, and it was lovely reading through the end notes of his book, because I was able to find studies like Susan Pocket, and there was something he alluded to in the last of those 3 books. Sapiens, maybe. It's not coming to mind. And there, in that book, in that work of fiction, there was a scientist doing a study on the limbic system, and they had manufactured this device which would activate and trick the limbic system into experiencing a religious event. And this worked in any human who didn't have an impaired limbic system. And the argument made by Robert J. Sawyer in that book was very strong. The reasoning that he used, the thought of, like, the limbic system is responsible for feeling where we end, so transmitting the, like, ego and the thought of an I in my brain into what an I feels like in my body. And when that physical perception of space and of one's body versus what is outside of oneself is blurred, if the limbic system is tricked in the way that was depicted in this book, then a person would have a religious experience. Other ways that the limbic system is actually tricked can include things like meditation or psychotropics, or, I'm going to use the wrong term there, I'm not very savvy on drugs, but I think that's the right word. Dancing, bodily becoming, and I'm going to horribly mispronounce this as well, but the experience of Om, which I read about in college. It's this experience of, like, as you are doing community dance, so you are engaging in a rhythmic bodily practice of movement in a community that is ritualized, the edges of our existence become blurred, and we can feel the community in a different way. We can feel those around us, we can hear, we can sense. And this is we started from a very scientifically grounded place, and I've now gone way off. But yeah, that's what's on my mind lately. I think I'm going to stop before I dive too much deeper and mispronounce and misquote more and more things. But that's kind of the reasoning for this series, if it could be called that. But I'm very excited to continue reading Susan Pocket with you and to continue to wrestle with our state of existence as conscious beings in this universe. And yeah, let's figure out some ways to trick our limbic systems. Have a great night, and I will see you in the future. Ooh.